Hi everyone, I'm Libby from ProWritingAid, and I'm delighted to be joined by new adult romance author Kristen Zimmer today. Kristen is a Massachusetts-based freelance writer and editor. Her first novel, The Gravity Between Us, a contemporary new adult romance, was included in 10 of the best LGBTQ+ books to read for Pride 2018 by USA Today's Happily Ever After book blog. Got for it. It was also Amazon's #1 bestseller in lesbian fiction and romance for over 8 weeks. And her second novel, When Sparks Fly, debuted at #1 in the same categories. And those are some pretty amazing results. So, Kristen, welcome. Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm sorry for stumbling through your. It's all the accolades and all of the achievements.
I'm so impressive, and you just had such a mouthful. That's my fault.
Absolutely, I completely blame you. It's all of you. So before we sort of dive into some writing questions today, I wondered if you could kind of tell everyone a little bit about what you write and how you kind of got your start as a romance writer.
I write queer romance, I guess would be the best way that I'd describe it. And I started writing it because there wasn't enough of it.
Yeah.
I was finding it really difficult to find books that I could see myself reflected in the pages. So I just sat down one day and said, I'm going to write something that I'd want to read. And that's how I got started.
Yeah. Is that kind of, because I know that there was kind of a bit of a gap between your first book and your most recent book, or if in this genre anyway. Did you find that it was a completely different ballgame this time around in that sense? And was the market sort of different? Was there more out there?
Oh my God, so much more. There's like I guess it was an 8-year gap between my first book and this book that got released. I did write something in between, but we're not talking about that today. In that time span, the market has exploded, and that's just kind of made my heart happy, because there's no such thing as oversaturation. There's room for every story, and I'm so glad that we're finally telling our stories. It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just really important as well to be able to see yourself in books, and also I think to feel like you're connecting with readers who are in some way like you as well, like, and that you feel kind of can connect with your own experience too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's a huge, I mean, I wrote a book that I would want to read at that age when I was 17, 18, 19, like that. It's such an underserved audience, and new adult in particular is kind of fresh. It's a new spin. You can take younger characters and just throw them into these new life experiences. So it's so fun to like write that.
Yeah, because there's so many kind of emotions, I guess, you can play with there, where people are dealing with big life events for the first time. Did you kind of take inspiration from yourself for that, or did you sort of just throw them into random situations and see how your characters reacted?
Yeah, you know what, like for me, my favorite time in my entire life up to this point was college. So I was just like, it was wild. It was awesome to just kind of meet new people from new cultures who had completely new life experiences and different perspectives. So that was kind of the time frame that I wanted to play with. So I just kind of went with that for the first book.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of we've had quite a lot of like authors that have been on this week, and pretty much all of them have just said, like, write from your heart, like write what you know and what makes you happy, kind of thing, because that's when you'll get the best results.
That's writing 101, is write what you know. And it's always going to be like, there's always going to be a certain personality that is yours in everything that you write. And but it's important though. Otherwise it's just kind of not going to read authentic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we had a session earlier with Mary Adkins, and she was kind of saying that one of her books, I think her agent at the time said, oh, it's the writing is brilliant, but you need to put some heart into it, or it's going to keep getting rejected. If there's not enough of you in there, people won't connect, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah. Did you kind of always want to be a writer, or was that something that just kind of sprung up one day that you decided, I'm going to do this, I'm going to write?
Yeah, you know what? The first time anybody ever asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was probably about 7, and I had 2 answers for them. A writer and a paleontologist, because I have a deep, abiding, nerdy love for dinosaurs. And one of those things came to fruition, so I guess it's not half bad.
No. Sure, those are some pretty interesting, like they're kind of some pretty grounded choices for
Yes, I can say that as a 7-year-old, I was like 30. So
yeah,
it's
perfect. I mean, it's the way to go. I was going to be a singer. It's not happened. Which how the fuck could sing. Did you kind of always plan to write new adult or young adult when you were thinking about being a writer, or was that again something that just came from connecting with your experience at college? Or yeah,
you know what, I I always kind of found just that age fascinating, because that's when you really start to come into your own. And there's so many potential different experiences for people to have at that age. So it wasn't necessarily something that I planned. It just kind of happened.
yeah. And do you think they were always going to be romances? Because we were talking before, and you were saying that you don't read romance, and it's not your favorite thing to read, but it's what you write. So was it a plan, or yeah?
Well, there was, I mean, okay, so I did write a book in between the 2 books now that are published that is not, it's not a romance. It has a romantic subplot and it's important to the story, but I mean, I don't know. My agent really loves that I write romance. Like, he loves it. He's just like, you're good at it. Just stay there. And I'm like, but I want to do something else, like a petulant child. So I can't, I mean, I don't know. I love writing romance. It's where my heart is, and that's where I started. So I'm probably just keep going with it, to be honest.
I mean, if it works, you've got, I guess that's kind of your agent's perspective as well. Yeah. Is that, I know, pesky.
But they do the job. They do the job that I don't want to do. So that's fine. You sell the book,
so
I'll
right.
write. Yeah.
Is that the same? Have you had the same agent for the whole period of time? Or?
Yes, I have.
Oh,
his
cool.
name is Mark Falcon. He's fantastic. He basically is just like, write what you want to write, and I'm going to sell it, and someone somewhere is going to buy it, and they're going to love you. And I'm like, you just said everything that every writer needs to hear.
Yeah, because like, do you think that's the case? Like, I feel like there's a reader out there for pretty much every book, and I imagine, like, with what you were saying about not being able to sort of find that representation in books that were already out there, if everybody listened to that, like, write what's popular, write what's selling at the moment, like, write what's already out there, then you wouldn't get so many brilliant books wouldn't have been published.
Right. I mean, and you have people like, you have Stephen King, who couldn't get a book published to save his life. You have, I mean, J.K. Rowling couldn't get a book published to save her life. And then the market changes. It's always changing. So write what you want to write, and eventually, I mean, you might have to keep it in a trunk for 20 years, but eventually there'll be a market. So
yeah, absolutely. Like, I think Talia Hibbert was saying that as well. She wrote Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and it was kind of like she was sort of thinking, I just want to write somebody that looks like me, and I want to just write what I want to see. And it's massive on TikTok. Like, it was like, it took a while to, I think she was even sort of saying like, oh, I'm scared to even submit for publication, because I don't think it'll like go, because it's not what's on the market at the moment. And now it's like a big hit as well. Did you kind of have that first like fear of submitting your work for publication? What was your sort of, I don't want to use the word journey, but what was your publication journey like?
Okay, so it all just kind of happened really quickly for me. With Gravity, I wrote it. I started querying literary agents, and I think from start to finish, with the beginning process before any of the publishing, it was probably about a year. So I got lucky. That is not at all what writers should expect. It takes time, and it takes a lot of patience. And yeah, like there was this trepidation going into it, but it's like, I love writing. I've always wanted to be a writer. So at some point you have to weigh it. Are you going to be brave and do what you love, or are you going to let fear, control you? So I just said, screw it, we're doing it. That's that.
yeah, I'm not having that happen. I'm doing it. Yeah, absolutely. What do you think makes, I suppose, so you've only written young adult or new adult romance, but do you have a sense of like what makes it different to, or not different to, adult romance? Are there things that you feel like you can do that you can't do in just adult romance, or like vice versa, things that you can't do that you could do? Or
yeah, okay, so the thing about young adult, new adult, and this is very important, when you're writing the racier scenes, okay, the sex scenes, right? Okay, it's good. It's acceptable. You can put sex scenes in your book, but you have to be a bit choosier about the words that you use to describe the actual acts. So that's always fun. Like there are words
get the thesaurus out.
Right. No, there are words that you use as an adult in an adult setting that you can't necessarily get away with, especially like When Sparks Fly is marketed as a young adult book. So it's for a younger audience. So there are some, words in the, I don't know if you got to the sex scene yet, but for the age group, I was told, I don't know if this is going to fly by the editors. And it's like, should we use, and I'm like, I'm using the words I want to use. It's fine. Like they're not kids, like they're kids by age, but like if you have a 16-year-old reading this and they're about it, then it's not like, maybe not the genre. You know what I mean? Like, so you do have to pick certain words that you wouldn't be able to, get away with in an older kind of environment, but it's a challenge, but it's also fun.
Yeah, I think it's always limitations on what you can write can almost be quite fun to work with sometimes, as much as sometimes they're annoying.
Yeah. So it's a you're straddling a line, and it's like, I like to push it as far as I can, and then when I get the feedback from the editors, like, you cannot say that word there, and I'm like, oh, fine. We'll find something else.
Do you are there any other things that you argue with your editors about, like not necessarily sex scenes, but just like word choices, anything?
No, you know what? It's like I'm fortunate. My editors are pretty great. And I'm pretty disciplined about moving my plot along. What writers will definitely come up against editors who want to take scenes out of your book. And I'm a writer, first and foremost. I can be super precious about everything that I write. It's like, no, I love that scene. We can't take that out. And then it's like, if you listen to the perspective that your editor is giving you, it's fluff. You don't need it. It's not helping the plot. It's not helping the relationship between your characters. 9 times out of 10, your editor is going to be right. So there have been times where I'm like, you're going to pry that scene from my cold, dead hands, but at the end of the day, they're right. So I'm just going to cut it.
Yeah, for sure. And do you kind of, with those scenes, do you still just keep them just in case they come up in another project? Or do you think, or when you write on one project, is it like that is for that project and it probably won't go into another one?
Oh no, if I really love a scene and it's not usable in that particular manuscript, I'm cutting it and I'm going to save it for later. Hell yeah, if it's a good scene. And if you're feeling it, like if you read the scene and you're just like, this is breathtaking, because writers never feel that way about their writing, and it's okay. But if you read that scene and you're like, yeah, this is fantastic and people need to read it, cut it and save it for later. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you gotta I don't know if it's a really English expression now that I was about to say. You gotta toot your own horn as a writer.
Yeah, it is English, but I mean, we understand it on this side of the pond. And I think that's right. Like writers are, I don't know, we're a very strange breed of people and we tend to be really hard on ourselves. I know I'm like super perfectionist when it comes to the things that I write. So, but you have to kind of take yourself out of the experience of being the writer and look at it and be like, damn, that's good. I don't know if somebody else could have done that. And it's okay. It's okay to see something that you write and just really love it. It's great. So when you get those moments, just own them, like take hold of it and run with it.
I really like, I don't know if somebody else could have done that. I'm gonna steal that for my own brain. Because that's great.
Yeah, because I mean, we all have, we have different, just vernacular colloquialism. We have different ways of speaking, and that translates into how you write. So every writer is going to phrase things differently. The idea might be similar or the same, but the way that it's expressed is going to be different. It's yours.
Yeah, for sure. So you said you're a bit of a perfectionist. Do you edit yourself as you go along, or do you just write?
I do. Okay. So I try to like stay on task and write, but it's hard to not go back and tweak things. It's so unnecessary sometimes, though. Like I feel like it's easier if you just write and then go back later, because editing too much while you're writing takes you out of the story and takes your emotion out of it. So
what are the sort of things that you go back and you find yourself going back and tweaking as you, or is it how people are speaking, or?
Yeah, that's a big one for me, is dialogue, because the trick to writing dialogue is that it has to sound authentic. It has to sound like two people having a real conversation in the world, or else it's just going to be crap. Like you have to, and in that, when you're writing dialogue, and especially when you're editing it, it's really important to read it aloud, because how it sounds in your head is not going to be how it actually sounds aloud. So that's the one thing I'd say, like usually read your writing aloud.
Yeah, for sure. And I find if I ever try and write dialogue, I won't use contractions sometimes, and then I'm like, I don't think I've ever spoken to. I mean, I just said, I do not think I have ever spoken to somebody and never used a contraction before. Yeah, exactly. And you read it aloud, and you're like, that doesn't sound like a person.
No one is going to say that. Yeah, exactly.
Where do you're kind of moving into sort of ideas, I guess now? Like, where do you get your ideas, I suppose, for your stories? Or I guess what I really want to ask is, like, do you start with the core relationship at the heart of your novel? Do you start with one character, setting?
Okay, well, for me, a general rule about setting, I always set my books where I live because it's easier. I know like the surrounding areas, and that's just like, it lets you get into like the meat. You can describe things really well if you know your environment. So that's for me just easy. I usually start with my main character or characters, and I'll do a really in-depth like character outline, who I want them to be, because it's important for me, and I think just in general, to not write characters. You want to write people that are three-dimensional. I want, by the end of my book, I want the reader to feel like they know those characters, like they're people that they could be friends with, or, that they can live across the street from. That's really important. Not creating characters, creating people.
Yeah. What do you think, I suppose, when people are writing, what do you think the main differences for you are between characters and people? If you were reading and you're like, that you've just written a character, what sort of thing do you think you'd be seeing?
I think what makes a character a person is making them three-dimensional and making them honest. Like, no person on this earth is one thing, ever, 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 ever. When human beings are complex, and your characters should be complex. We're not all good or all bad or happy all the time or sad all the time. It's such a rich range of emotion, and it's important to let your characters feel all the things.
Yeah.
Otherwise they're going to be flat. You know, like, you can't have a villain that's all bad. You can't have a good guy that's all good. It just doesn't work. It won't work that way.
And I think readers want to feel all the things as well. And if the characters aren't feeling it,
that's a rule that I have, is that if I'm writing a scene that's particularly emotional, I better be crying when I'm writing it. Like, not a joke, because it's like, if you're not feeling it, you can't channel it into your characters, and it's just gonna be unconvincing, and it's gonna fall flat with people who are reading it. So that's really important. I think be as honest with yourself and with your emotions when you're writing as you can be. It sucks and it's exhausting, and afterwards you're gonna need a nap and some chocolate, but it's worth it. It's worth it.
That's a good bit of writing advice as well. Nap and chocolate. I think I like that one.
Oh, always keep them full stock of chocolate.
Because I mean, Britain's life in When Sparks Fly had been like pretty tough before the novel starts. How do you decide when to throw conflict in, when to sort of throw them under a bus, so to speak, and when to pull back and like give your characters a bit of a break? Does it ever? I mean, I imagine from what you just said, it does hurt when you have to make something go wrong for them, but do you ever have to convince yourself to make something go wrong for them, so there's a bit of conflict in that?
Yeah, no, you know what? It's like, for me, it's like plotting. I always have plot notes, and plotting for me, it's loose, because sometimes a story can be a beast of its own making. So it's good to just have an idea of where you want the story to go, but it doesn't have to be so rigid. You have to be open to like the story suggesting where it wants to go. And that goes back to definitely like making strong characters. They'll let you know when they need a break. That's really like the best. I can't explain it. But you don't want to put too many eggs in one basket, too much trauma at one time, although people love trauma. I don't know why. Yeah, so it's like, there was a scene in When Sparks Fly that was really hard for me to write, that Britain was having a panic attack. And that was so emotional. And afterwards, you knew she just needed a break, because you as a human being would need a break after that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really just common sense where the ebb and flow is in the story. Once something huge happens, there needs to be a breather and some room to just kind of build to the next.
Yeah, and for that to sink in and have its effect on what's going to come next as well. Yeah. Lots of people in the chat are saying that they've also cried while writing some of their scenes. Like, we're all in it together. We're all just going to cry together. This is what we're here for.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, writing for me is cathartic. It lets me get into my feelings that I don't want to deal with, and like that I don't have time. Nobody has time to be crying in their life. So sit down, write the thing, and really let yourself feel it. And if you're gonna cry, cry. That's awesome. It's fine.
So you're kind of saying about the conflict, you have a vague outline of like where it's gonna go. Do you do any sort of outline before you start writing? Like, what does your process look like before you start?
Yeah, I do. I do like to just have a loose kind of plot storyline going on paper. And it's like, just to frame the story is the best way to go. Just have an idea of where you want the story to go. But of course, there are going to be times when you're going to get a scene in your head at 2 o'clock in the freaking morning, and you're going to just need to write it. And it might not fit at the point where you're at in your manuscript, but write it anyway. Write it down. I always have a secondary document for moments like that, where it's like, okay, this will fit later. I love it. I'm going to make it fit. So don't let the idea escape you. Write it down, put it somewhere else, and just put a pin in it.
Do you have like a little notebook that you use for those 2 a.m. moments. Tony was just saying that in the chat, those 2 a.m. muses scream. They don't just go.
No, it's like having an infant in your home. It just will not stop. You have to write it down. So yeah, I actually have, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I'm old school. I don't like technology as much. So I have actual paper notebooks in every room of my house. Every room,
cool.
Bedroom, bathroom, not a joke. Half one in the bathroom. Every room has got a notebook in it.
I remember at our last conference that we did, one of the authors was saying she had these sticky notes in the shower, and there were these shower sticky notes that you can write in the shower, and they're waterproof.
No, oh my God.
Maybe you need those.
That's dedication. No, my shower time is my quiet time. I just turn it off and I get yeah, no, I can't. But God bless her. Oh my goodness.
Do you think with writing, being a writer, does it ever sort of turn off? Are those ideas, are those characters kind of with you always, kind of talking to you? And is that kind of something you know?
It never goes away. It's they're when you're really in it, when you're fully focused on writing your story, they're like ghosts. They just won't quit. They're always. And they don't care about time. They don't care if you're working or if you're at the park with your kids. They don't care. They will show up when they want to show up. So, I mean, I think you really the best bet is to always be prepared. Always be prepared. Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, you never know when they're just gonna jump out with your next amazing idea. Exactly. Yeah. Is that kind of what you love and hate about writing, or do you have anything you kind of love about writing and then don't love about writing so much as well?
I wouldn't say that I love that that life of its own that it has when I'm really into writing a story. And I love how super focused I can get on it. And I'll tell you honestly, when I get those 2:30 in the morning moments, nobody who lives in my house appreciates it. It's oh, the light's going on. I'm writing Kristen, what is wrong with you? I'm a writer. I don't know. So I love it. And yes, I hate it, but other people who are not me hate it. So
no, you just go, I'm an artist. I'm sorry, I'm an artist.
I'm an artist. I can't control it. I'm sorry. No, but it just hits you at the most ridiculous moments, and you just kind of have to go with it. And yeah, it's a love-hate relationship, and I think all writers will say that. It's great, but also at the most inopportune times, you'll get hit with an idea.
Yeah. You've written in a dual perspective and in a single perspective across these two books. Did you find that quite a different experience between the two? Did you have to plan differently, write differently? Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not gonna lie. The gravity between us was just so free flow for me versus When Sparks Fly, which was very, very well plotted. So writing the dual narrative was a lot harder because you have to give your two main characters who are telling the story in first person distinct voices. Otherwise, it's just going to be confusing. So that was hard. I had to create essentially two people that were telling the same story. When Sparks Fly was so easy because I had my character, Britton, whom I just love. I love her. And it was her story. It was her story to tell and her life that I wanted people to live. Yeah. So yeah, the process was very different for both books, just in general.
Yeah. How do you because I love her as well. She's she'll kind of say offhand, oh, I've been through this really terrible experience, but and she just sort of keeps going and she keeps her head up and sort of keeps being giving people the benefit of the doubt as well. And she has got a great voice to her. I could I feel like she's a real person. Like, how do you have anything sort of like conscious that you do to like, you got to think, I've got to get my readers on side with this character. Like, how do you get your readers on side with a character in your?
No, I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Britain is the most me character that I've ever written. And it's like, I think when you're a character, she's set in this world where she's just had a tough time, but she's decided that she's not gonna let it break her.
Yeah.
And I think that people can make that choice. You can just have a ton of, pardon my French, shit thrown at you, and you get to choose whether you're going to break or whether you're going to rise. So I just kind of tried to channel a lot of the decisions that I've made in my life into her as a character. It's not easy, but you have to decide who your character is, and then just let them go from there.
And then I guess on the, not the reverse, but how do you then create a love interest that works for your protagonist? What do you think makes a good and a compelling love interest?
Okay, so a good and compelling love interest. Oh, that's a good question.
Good and compelling, interesting words.
I was told these questions were going to be easy. No. I think, okay, so there has to be, besides physical chemistry, like everybody knows that the first thing you notice about a person is how they look, but that's bullshit. At the heart of it, you have to have enough in common that it would work, but you have to have different perspectives on life, because it's all just a balancing act, isn't it? If you're approaching it like finding your soulmate, and that's not someone who won't fight with you and who sees everything exactly as you do. It's someone who balances you out. So I think that that's important. You have your main character, and then you have your secondary character, who's the love interest, who has just enough difference to balance them out.
Yeah. And do you subscribe to we've had a lot of chat actually about the happy ever after or the happy ever after for now. Do you subscribe to either of those, or like both, or just whatever suits the story?
You know what? Honestly, I don't. I know that there are going to be people who say if it's not happily ever after, it's not a romance, and I think that's bullshit, because it's not always about the ending. It's about the journey. And not, I mean, like, let's be honest. We live in this world where we don't get happily ever afters every time, but that doesn't negate the value of the relationship while you're in it. So I think happily ever after works. That's what I've written so far, but I also think that happy for now works as well. So
yeah, I think it's kind of, and I almost think something I've been thinking as people have been talking about it, where the book comes to the end, I suppose the reader can kind of decide it for themselves as well. Like, they can say, well, they are happy, I can see they're happy then, but then other stuff could happen, and almost you can give your reader that choice, make that choice for you if you don't want to make it yourself as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's be realistic. Happy forever. What does that mean? That's unless you're ending the story where they like die together at the same time, it's not happy. It's always kind of happy for now. But I think like that's also a really good point, because it opens it up to like sequels, which some publishers love sequels, others don't. But it's all relevant.
I assume you've written both of yours, like assuming it was going to be a standalone and not. But have you kind of left little things that could be tied up later on in a sequel, but don't jeopardize the standalone?
Yeah, The Gravity Between Us was very much intended to be a standalone. When Sparks Fly was not, actually. I had like an ongoing story in progress for them, but right now that's on hold. I don't know. But I mean, life is messy, so it's okay to give your characters a little bit of a mess that needs cleaning up. And you know, if you want your story to be a standalone, it's fine, because it's nobody's perfect, but also it opens that up for further continuation of their stories.
Yeah. So you said earlier you try not to edit as you go along. So like in an ideal world, if you haven't been editing as you go along, what does your editing process look like once you've kind of written your first draft? Do you show it to anyone? When do you show your first draft to someone? Because I think it's quite a vulnerable thing to do.
When do I show my first draft to someone? I don't. I would take it to the grave before I'd let anybody read it, like raw, unedited at all. No, the first draft is mine. It's my baby. And it's for me to, you know, go in and tweak and fix mistakes or phrasings that I didn't like, or cut scenes or add scenes. So no, nobody gets the first draft ever. That's my eyes only. Once I've gone back and given it like a really thorough reread, then I'll share it with like 2 people on planet Earth and my literary agent. He'll get the second draft because he's fantastic and he's got great eyes. And it's always, I think it's really important, once you've got your second draft to a point where you're happy with it, then you have to have other people look at it, because they've got fresh eyes and a fresh perspective. You've been reading it for so many weeks, days, whatever, just focusing on it, that other people will catch things, plot holes, or even just like spelling mistakes that you will not catch. So
yeah, I mean, for me, I imagine, because I've never written a book, but the amount of times I will send out like a newsletter to people signed up for the ProWritingAid newsletter or something, and like, or no, do you know what? I normally catch them, but the amount of time I've nearly sent one out and I'm like, type them in the first line. So I would absolutely miss a plot hole. So I definitely, you need somebody to just go, it maybe needs a little bit of work there.
Oh yeah, no, I would definitely say that editors, proofreaders, beta readers, they're all like worth their weight in gold, because they will find things that you, being a precious author and having looked at it exhaustively, you definitely missed.
Yeah, sure. Have you ever had it where you've had to make some sort of major change to a manuscript, like structurally, or your editor's come back and said, hey, you need to take this out, and that means you're going to have to rejig a whole load of it? How did you deal with that?
Yeah, no, The Gravity Between Us, it was a very different book. What I had submitted for publishing and what they actually bought, I signed the contract for, very different book than what got published. In that book, my character Peyton was a lot more of an asshole. I absolutely loved her as the, you know, like that kind of tough girl character. And my editors were like, but she's got these lovely soft moments and we'd love to see more of that. And I was like, oh. So yeah, I had to go in, I really had to go in and kind of change the meat and bones of her as a character. How did I approach it? It was a lot of crying and a lot of frustration, but no, I mean, you do the thing, you weigh it, what other people think the story should be, and you decide, yeah, does that feel right, or no, does it not? And it ultimately, yeah, it did feel right, like, to me. So I went in and I cut the scenes, or I changed the scenes, and it's a lot more work than you anticipate, but it's worth it. The end product is definitely worth it. I can say that I love The Gravity Between Us the way that it was published. I was, I loved writing it, and the way that, I submitted it was great too. I enjoyed it, but it was a different animal that the world got to see. And I mean, people like it. I've heard lots and lots of good feedback about it. I'm happy about how it ended up.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of read a lot of people saying that it was one of the first lesbian fiction books that they read, and it is really special to them for that reason. I kind of just wanted to see how that feels to like occupy that space in someone's heart.
let's get into that. How does that feel? How does that make me feel as an author? Okay. I sat down to write a book that I wanted to read. And oh my God, I'm gonna get like emotional. Hold on. that is a lot. That is feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people, that it was their first, and that it was special to them. And I like to, play it off and be like, oh yeah, I love being a woman's first, But honestly, no, I mean, like that, it's such a incredible feeling that I don't know that I can really put into words. It's like, you're having someone tell you that essentially you changed their life. And it's like, I just wrote a fucking book, but like, that's amazing. Like, that's like, I can't describe it. It's such a, like, my heart swells 3 sizes every time I hear it. So, I mean, that's probably the best feedback an author could ever get, really.
I think that's what a lot of authors would dream of, like knowing that you've changed someone's life through what you've written, and it being such a personal thing as well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's brought me to tears many times, like reading messages from people, and it's like, oh man, like I did not set out to be like changing the world, but awesome. All right, that's amazing.
I'll take it. Yeah, sure. Superhero me, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we jumped on the webinar, I really love your Twitter presence. And what would you kind of say to authors starting out and getting their names out there and like building up? Because I know it's something that scares a lot of people, is like their social presence and feeling like they have to have a presence. And do you think it's something that's more important for YA authors, or kind of just all authors, really?
I would love to be able to say that having a social media presence doesn't matter. I want to be one of those people who lives on an island and doesn't interact with anyone, but it's just not, in this day and age, it's not going to sell books. You want to sell books, you have to have some kind of like presence in the world, especially, if you're an indie author, because a lot of it is going to be you doing the work. I'm fortunate because I have a whole team behind me who does the work. For me, social media is just it's me having a good time. So it's important to just kind of, I don't know, there are moments when I'm really like my authentic self on social media, and there are moments when I just have a good time and I just want to be funny. And I think if you can strike the balance between the two, you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I think the authors that get the most like engagement, I guess, on social are people that are just saying, no, here's what I think, and here's how I exist in the world, and this is me. And yeah, I think that's what I like about your Twitter, really, is that I was like, oh, this is good. I'm getting a sense of who she is before I meet her in front of all these people.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't work well for me in school because I had a tendency to just say whatever the hell I wanted to say, but social media, that's mine. I'm going to say what I want to say. It's like, you can subscribe to it, and if you think it's a laugh, that's great. And if not, well, that's fine too. Like,
We've had some questions in, so I think I'm gonna jump into some questions. So Kerry has asked, is the coming out story overdone nowadays in the genre? Or in other words, do we need more stories where the social identity is not questioned or resisted and the character is just okay with who they are? Which I think is kind of the case in When Sparks Fly. Is, I think Britain's pretty comfortable with who she is in most ways.
Well, see, like, the thing I would say about coming out stories in general is that, one, they're always different. You're never going to find two people who have the same story. You might have similar experiences, but it's always going to be different. And two, it's a process. You are coming out constantly over time. Every time you meet a new person, that they don't know that about you, you know? So do I think that it's overdone? I wouldn't say that it's overdone. I think that there's room for everybody's coming out story. Are there other stories to tell? Yeah, obviously there are other stories to tell, because, you know, I'm gay, but that's not all I am, you know, like there's more to my life than that. But you know, it's in When Sparks Fly, it was a process for Avery, not so much for Britton. She was just like, okay, this is who I am. But I think if that's just a story that you want to tell, you should tell it.
Yeah, sure. So we've got a question about, I guess not your, because I said before to Kristen that everybody always likes to know about writing routine, but actually CC Cruz has asked, do you have anything on your desk when you're writing, or like writing rituals that you have?
Do I have something on my desk? I do have something that is on my desk at all times, and if it's not on my desk, I feel very not put together. I'll actually show it to you. It's a little dinosaur. I have it on my desk. I don't know why it is, like, he's not actually making a difference to my life, but he's got to be on the desk. Also, I have to have music all the time. So, or otherwise I just can't, like, I can't get into a flow. So
do you, like, I know some authors make playlists for their books to get into the mood. Do you do that?
Oh yeah, I make playlists for other people's books, not just for my books, for other people's books. I have a whole like soundtrack to every book I've ever read. I'm insane. It's well, music is really just so important to me. And before I really decided to like be a writer, I actually went to music school. So I'm that person.
Cool.
I need to have music. So
yeah, cool. Another question which I quite like, which could go in any way, is just how far have you gone in the name of research?
Far have I gone in the name of research?
I thought I'd just throw that at you because I thought it was a fun question.
Okay. I mean, like, I guess it depends. Okay, so no, I wrote a book that isn't published yet. It's a trunk novel, and in it there's a lot of like weaponry. And I got my gun license in Massachusetts. I went to the range, and because I was like, if I'm describing this, I need to know how it feels. Yeah. So I would say I can get pretty hands-on in the name of research.
Mary has asked if you could give the definition of young adult and new adult in terms of like ages, if there is one, or whether you kind of cross over. Or...
Yeah. Okay. So, and this is actually pretty clinical. New adult is technically classified as 18 to 25. Young adult is obviously anything below 18, and then we could get into middle grade, but I don't do that. So, yeah, young adult is like high school age, I would say, but clinically, if you're gonna market it as new adult, it's 18 to 25.
So kind of as you were saying before, there's so much more LGBTQIA plus literature on the market now. Do you think that's just kind of, do you think that's come out of new publishers opening up and like old gatekeepers perhaps not having as much say as they used to? Did you choose your publisher very specifically, or did they come to you, or how did that?
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna say that with digital publishing, it's completely changed the game. You're not beholden to the big five anymore. You're not beholden to the old school paper publishers that had a very rigid way of looking at manuscripts. So now with smaller pubs popping up and becoming successful, that's really kind of changed the game and opened the world up for new stories. Also, I think the world itself has kind of evolved. We're seeing a lot more LGBTQIA people represented in other forms of media, not just books. So I think that the publishing industry in order to not die and to keep up with that, with the world that we live in. People are living out and proud now, and we're not going backwards. So that's that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people, they don't want the same stuff anymore, and they don't want the same story over and over again too. And it would just be, I mean, it'd be bad business sense, but I also just think it'd be bad social sense as well. It's just,
right, exactly. And we can't just have Wuthering Heights over and over and over again.
I don't know that I could have Wuthering Heights over and over and over again. It's bad enough when I get the song stuck in my head. Somebody said they loved the title The Gravity Between Us. What inspired that title?
Honestly, that friggin' book did not have a title through half of it. It was just like, meh, that was the title of it for a long time. And then there was a moment where Kendall said it, there's gravity between us. And I was like, that's the name of this fucking book. It hit me. And that was like my one non-negotiable thing, is because this is something that like first-time authors don't necessarily know. The title that you give your work 90% of the time will not be the title that it goes to publishing with. They're going to change it. I was like, we're not changing the title of this book. Drop me. I'll go somewhere else, because it just felt like so right. And yeah, I don't know. It was something that I wrote and it hit real hard, and that was the title.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it feels sort of really perfect, especially as it's come from one of the characters. And yeah, I guess, have you ever like had an altercation over like a cover or anything like that of your books? Or actually, Todd asked, since both of your books have two women on the cover, is that ever did that ever feel like it was going to niche the market down that would buy it, or has that changed over time as well?
Honestly, I had no qualms whatsoever about The Gravity Between Us. It was perfect from the get-go. It was like, my publisher was awesome. The way that they just did everything, it was just like 100%. Are you good with this? Yeah. The second time around, I did have a little, like, the name When Sparks Fly was not mine, and I did not at first wasn't crazy about it. I had given it a different name, and the titles that we went through that they wanted to change it to, none of them were When Sparks Fly. None of them. So when they hit me with that, I was like, I mean, okay, that's fine. We'll work with it. I could do that. And then at that point, the cover became really important to me, because I had like it in my head. You can have the title. I get to decide what the cover looks like. And we went back and forth on the cover quite a bit, but ultimately the way that it ended up is gorgeous, and I love it, and I wouldn't change it. So no,
I know it sounds really pretentious. I love the light in the photo as well, and the way all the colors it is a really nice cover. And if you haven't read either of Kristen's books, check out the links that I think Ash will post in the chat very soon as well. But they're gorgeous. And I mean, if you can judge a book by its cover, then they're great books. And when you read them, they live up. So we're actually really nearly out of time, but I did want to ask, just like as a little closing thing, what's something you wish you'd known when you were still, I guess, an aspiring to be published author? What was sort of a key, I guess, anxiety you had about it, and has anything changed since you've been published?
Yeah, you know what? When I first started writing, it was, is anybody going to read this book? And now I'm not concerned about if anybody's going to read it. Now I'm going to write something that I need to write. And if people read it and they like it, that's awesome. You can't focus on other people's ideas of what a perfect novel is, because it doesn't exist. So just write what you want to write and drown out the noise.
Yeah, Oh, I mean, I don't actually want to stop talking, but I know I have to. But thank you so much for joining us. And I know that everybody's been loving this in the chat. There's been some really great, like, insightful comments in response to what you've been saying. People saying thank you, people saying it was a fun and inspiring interview, which is great. I wanted to say before we wrap up, I misspoke earlier and said this was the last session today. It is not the last session today. I've completely disregarded a whole panel of lovely authors. We've got the Harlequin panel at 6 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to check that out. I'm sorry if that confused anyone. You're getting lots of love in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and all of you guys in the chat as well. Remember, tomorrow is the premium exclusive day, so if you haven't signed up for ProWritingAid Premium yet, you can get 40% off with the Romance Week discount. I think Ash will drop the links soon in the chat. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everybody that's come out this evening, come out from your own homes. And Kristen, thank you again so much for all of your insight.
Thanks, I had a great time.
Brilliant, lovely. Right, see you all soon. Bye. Bye.